Chemical equations are fundamental to understanding chemistry. Chemists use chemical equations to describe reactions. And in order to understand a chemical reaction, you need to write the chemical equation properly. Now, let's look at this reaction. This is what's called a thermite reaction. What is happening here is iron oxide or rust is reacting with aluminum. Now, to produce pure iron and aluminum oxide. Now, this reaction is so violent and so hot, it actually melts the iron. So the chemical equation for this is iron 2 oxide plus aluminum on the reacted side or the left side of the arrow, and it produces iron liquid plus aluminum oxide solid on the product side of the equation. Now, this is an example of how all equations are outlined. Reactants on the left side of the arrow, products on the right side of the arrow. The state symbols are next to the compounds to actually say what they were in the reaction. So iron oxide was solid, aluminum was solid, producing a liquid iron and solid aluminum oxide. However, this equation has one fatal flaw. It's unbalanced. What I mean by unbalanced is one of the laws of chemistry is the law of conservation of mass. Mass cannot be created and or destroyed. So what this means for chemical equations is that if it's on one side of the arrow, it needs to be on the other side of the arrow. So, for example, look at the iron. In iron oxide, we have 2 irons, but on the product side, we only have 1 iron atom. So this is an unbalanced equation. Let's go through this and actually balance it. So, as I said, we only have 1 iron on the product side, but if we put a 2 in front of it, coefficient, we're left with 2 irons on the product side, 2 irons on the reactant side. That's balanced. We have 3 oxygens on the product side, or the reactant side, 3 on the product side. The oxygens are balanced. Aluminum, we have 2 aluminum on the product side, however we only have 1 aluminum on the reactant side. By putting a 2 coefficient in front of aluminum, we now have a balanced equation. Now, let's have an example of another chemical reaction. Nitrogen triiodide. This is a very unstable compound. It wants to decompose very violently. So, for example, by just touching it with this feather, the solid actually explodes. So, the chemical equation for this reaction is nitrogen trioxide decomposes to nitrogen and iodine. Now, for practice, balance this equation, and when we come back, we'll go through it to see if you were correct. Now, let's try balancing the nitrogens first. We have 2 nitrogens on one side of the equation, only 1 nitrogen on the reactant side. By putting a 2 coefficient in front of the reactant, we actually have 2 nitrogens are balanced. Now let's look at the iodine. We have 6 iodine on the reactant side, but only 2 on the product. By putting a 3 in front of the iodine, we have a balanced equation. Now, before moving on to this equation, always be sure to check your work. Everything should be balanced. 2 nitrogens, 2 nitrogens. 6 iodine, 6 iodine. This is a balanced equation.